G'day, fans of the Stat Files preview podcast. My name is Binman. This is hopefully not our last Stats File preview podcast. It's Friday afternoon. Teams are in. Super excited, albeit very nervous about tomorrow's wildcard game against the Blues at the MCG. Super excited. Obviously, as I say, a bit nervous. That's fair to say as well. I'm Binman. This is the Stats File preview podcast. Thanks for, if I don't get a chance at the end or I forget, thanks to everyone who's listens during the season. And hopefully this won't be the last, and I'll get to preview our elimination final next week against the Crows. But let's see how we go. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Pay respects to elders past and present and emerging leaders who are listening to the podcast today. Boonwurrung land extends from the Werribee River through Melbourne, along the coast of Port Phillip Bay and Western Port, all the way to Wilson's Promontory. I love to live on Boonwurrung country, and I'm in near the water of Port Phillip Bay, so over the Werribee Riverway. And big shout out to the Boonwurrung people. Let's jump straight into it. It's been a sort of nervous wait of, I have to say, as a sort of preparatory thing, I've listened to no football media this week. Hopefully the boys put last week's performance behind them quicker than I did, because it's taken me a little while to get my head around that loss. And also I haven't really wanted to listen to any footy media because the analysis drives me nuts, this sort of each game in a bubble style that they love to do. And I just couldn't ever, if I'm perfectly honest, I could not stand the inevitable, let's jump on the bloody Blues bandwagon palaver. It just would have done my head in. So I haven't, which is a bit unfortunate, really. Like, I don't, in the last few weeks I've been listening to all sorts of footy media, but, in the lead up to what could be our last game, hopefully it isn't, obviously, I haven't really wanted to listen to any footy media this week. And for that, I blame the standard of football media. It's woeful. The analysis is woeful. Lack of independence from the AFL is woeful. Don't get me started. I could go on for ages how little I like the way football's covered. Anyway, that's probably a story for another podcast or another day. So let's jump into it. Let's have a look at the sort of overarching information from Wheelo's preview. The two teams, their rating. Our rating is for attack is 11.4. Their rating for attack is 0.4. Our rating for defence is 2.8. That's improved. Theirs is 6.1 defensively. They're pretty strong. Overall, our rating, these are Wheelo's ratings, plus 14.3 to their 6.4. And I'd like to put a pin on that. I think that really demonstrates the gulf or the gap between the two teams. I'll unpack this a bit later, but I personally think, despite the terrific form since Fraser took over as senior coach of the Blues, I think they're well and truly overrated. And I think those ratings, he came in at round 10, so it's not, like the first 9 games super inflating these figures. Especially in terms of attack, we're plus 11.5, as I said. So, and they're only 0.4. Those numbers don't lie to me. So I just think they're overrated. In terms of head-to-head all-time record, 122 times the Blues have beaten us. We've won 98 times at the venue, though. And this is important for this season because it's our fortress. At the venue, it's 57-55. So we've won twice more at the 112 games at the MCG, and we've won 57 of those 112 games. I'll unpack in terms of the a bit more of the detail later in terms of those stats. Looking at the head-to-head record or the recent form of these two sides, our recent encounters, our last time obviously was in round 3 earlier this year. Seems a long time ago, doesn't it? A lot of water's flowed, under the bridge since March 29th in round 3. Awesome comeback at half after being down at half time to win that game. So 77-100, we win that game. Fantastic effort. The previous game was last year in round 19. The Blues got over top of us 78-70. And then the previous game before that was in round 9, 2024, in May. Back in May, heartbreaker. We lose that point by we lose that match by a point. So we won't go back to the 23 finals. Heebie-jeebies about that. So hopefully we can put some of those ghosts to bed on Saturday night. In terms of the form for these two teams, the Ds have won 15 times. We've lost 8 times. We're 7th on the ladder. The Blues, 10th on the ladder. They've won 12 times. They've drawn 1 and they've lost 10 times. The last 5 matches for us. Heartbreaking loss last week against the Bulldogs. Really, really disappointed, obviously. But, it's time to look forward. The bonus of that loss is the opportunity to go to a footy game this week and watch the Mighty D's bury some demons. We'll bury some Blues, bury some ghosts at the MCG on Saturday night. So that's a bonus. The negative, obviously, is that we would have had a week off. Howes, had another week to recover. Lever, ditto. Jeffo, ditto. And then we, we play elimination final and opportunity to stay at home. But that's all in the past, so let's look forward. Disappointing loss. I just don't think we had the run in that game. Anyway, the previous week when we did have the run, 132-56 win over Port Adelaide. A previous game, that great win over Freo, rolled the Gold Coast Suns before that, and then the Cats beat us. So in terms of their last 5 matches, the Blues, that is 119, they rolled 119-82. They rolled the Dockers last week. That was a funny old game, that one. Dockers didn't seem to really be up and about pressure-wise. The previous week, which is a really good pointer to this game, I think, against the Blues on the weekend, they drew with the Dogs at the Docklands, 82 apiece. Before that, they beat the Saints by 42 at Marvel, 106-62. They totally smashed the Brisbane Lions, 158-78 at Marvel. And then the week before that, they rolled the, also at Marvel, I think. Perhaps I'm wrong on that. Might be in the G. No, Marvel. They rolled the Suns, 110-97. So, they've not been a high-scoring team this season, but they've, in the last 5 matches, they've crossed the 100-point barrier 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So that is impressive for a team that his defence is stronger than its defence is stronger than its attack. Everyone's up and about the Blues. They're everyone's favourite team at the moment in terms of the media. Whatever. In terms of the the betting in this game, it's actually not the betting. Let's look at the last 10 matches. So normally I look at the last 5 matches, but I'm going to look at the last 10 matches for these two teams because I think it tells an interesting story. So in the last 10 matches, our average points for 102.8. Their average points for 95.8, and inflated, obviously by those scores in the last 5 games. And so a lot of those games, there weren't that much heat in, but that Lions game, for instance, was a classic late season Lions game when they're getting ready for the finals. They don't care about those games. And I've been tipping them all season, and I reckon they'll win the flag. It's all about peaking at the right time, and they have become the past masters at peaking at the right time. So, they don't care about getting smashed by the Blues at Marvel. Anyway, where was I? So average points for in the last 10, 102-95. Average points against, and this one I thought was really interesting because of the critique about our defensive system. The Blues are given up 79.5. Their opponents are putting past them in the last 10 games. We're only giving up 85.5. If you believe all the media palaver, you'd reckon we're getting smashed each week, and it's just not the case. So in our last 10 games, our opponents are averaging 10.5. Sorry, what am I saying? 10.5, 85.5, which is pretty good going, actually. Our average winning margin is 33 in that time. The average winning margin for the Blues is 35.4. Average losing margin, 19.3. Their averaging losing margin is 42. When they get opened up, they get opened up. Average total match points, and I think this reflects our improved defensive systems, 188.3 for us, and their average total match points is 175.3. So, the Blues, everyone's sort of pumping up their defense. We've been pretty impressive as well in the last 10 matches, and I think that's well worth sort of pointing out, I think, and having a good focus on. In terms of the last 5 games, interestingly, the Blues have played. Interestingly, Carlton has played its past 5 games under the Marvel Stadium roof. That ground really favours their high possession chip mark style. So they've won 4 of them. They drew that one against the Doggies. But I think it's worth noting that I reckon that inflates their win-loss record a little bit. As I say, it really favours, it's obviously there's no wind and there's no rain and it's not wet. And it really favours their high possession chip mark style. I don't think their athletic profile is all that good. I think that's one of the reasons why they use that high possession chip mark style, because they want to avoid the game getting into a sort of like a battle of the running power, although they've certainly improved heaps in that space, no doubt about that, and I'll highlight that in a second. But yeah, the Marvel suits them down to a T, because one, it's smaller, they can hit those targets. Teams aren't going to stretch them like the width, like they will at the G. So, I think that's worth noting. Under Fraser, their record, the Blues' record at the MCG, is far less convincing. Since Fraser took on the job, the Blues have claimed narrow wins at the G over Geelong by just 4 points. Only beat Essendon by 5 points. They only beat Richmond at the MCG by 2 points, and they lost to Hawthorn and Collingwood. That's their record at the G under Fraser. Isn't that convincing at all? And I personally think a factor is their style, the chip mark, sort of lots of high disposal, high mark style. I think that can get pulled apart at the G. Obviously, the conditions, the weather plays a part. In terms of injury, they've got 7 players on their injury list, 4 just best 23 not available. Will Hayward's a big out. He's been excellent. After a slow start at the Blues, he's been really terrific for them. And so he's a big out, not playing. He didn't play last week, but they were hopeful. He was a test for this week. They were hopeful he would get up. Matt Carroll, borderline best 23. I'm not counting AMW, so maybe I don't count Matt Carroll, but he played most of 2025. I think he's got a knee injury. He hasn't played at all this season. Nick Newman and Jesse Motlop. So, they're probably borderline best 23 too, if I was honest. So arguably just, you could put a case together that just Will Hayward is their only best 23 not available. So, that looks pretty good for them, it must be said. We've got 9 on our injury list. That includes Roo, who's not available. So including Roo, 5 best 23 not available. I'm putting these in order of significance. Roo is a huge out, massive out. Like that really hurt our chances, I have to say. And as I said on the Demon Lab podcast, I'm disappointed that he had a brain fade. It's not a hanging fence, but geez, that's the second time that's happened where he's missed a final. You've got to get that out of his game. So Roo, he's massive out, both for his second ruck, being second ruck as well, but he's 42 goals, our leading goal scorer. Big out. Lever, obviously his experience would be awesome. He's, brilliantly had a brilliant season. His intercept marking has been terrific. So he is clearly a big out. Howes, I think it's just flown under the radar how big an out Howes has been. He has been one of our most consistent defenders all season, makes good decisions, good by foot. He is a big out for us. And you could probably raffle these two, Jeffo and Cully. Probably Cully, to be honest, is probably ahead of, in terms of performance, he'd certainly be ahead. Jeffo was average in the first half, and it was just sort of a bit of I highlighted him last week on the preview pod, and geez, I put the moz on him as well. After I put the moz on our defenders, since then we've gone down like 9 pins. So maybe I shouldn't highlight any players this week, though I will. So yeah, he was average in the first half, Jeffo, last week, but he was great in that third quarter. So, in terms of his intensity and tackling, I suspect, wouldn't be surprised if he got a rocket at half time. Really bad luck for him. It doesn't sound too bad. So if we win, both Lever and Jeffo should come back in next week, as should Howe. So, huge for us. Just on the having to play this game, of course, it's not ideal that we don't have the week off. One benefit is that if we win and we win next week, I'm going to go next week. If we win next week, I've never been to Adelaide Oval, and I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go. That's one more game that Roo it's one more game against his 3-week suspension. So he'll be right to go. If we win the elimination final, Bob's your uncle. He gets to play the next week. So that would be awesome. So in terms of injury, no question they're in a better sort of place with just, really the key is how many best 23 not available. The injury list is important, but at the moment it's best 23, and that's just Will Hayward, Roo, Lever, Howes are the 3 players for me that really hurt. So, yeah, they're definitely better positioned on that front. Selection, Blues out Durkin, and sounds like some – I won't say what it sounds like, Durkin, in Nick Hines. So it's a big in for them. I reckon he's number 1 for intercepts, and, he's a good player, so it's a good in for them. Out Jake Lever, Matthew Jefferson, and Christian Salem. I said on the podcast on Monday night, the Demonland podcast with George, that I couldn't see Jack Viney coming back in because, we really need players with run, and I was thinking Latrell and Cross might be a chance. But I did say that if Jack Viney were to come in, it would be at Christian Salem's expense, and it looks exactly that way that's happened. Christian Salem goes out, Jack Viney comes in, Jake Melksham comes in, and Xavier Taylor. Wow, so it's fair to say for me that our wins came as a surprise. I could really only claim vaguely Jack Viney I got right, and then that was with a asterisk as well. But I think that would have loved to pay good money to have been a fly on the wall at the selection committee. The positive, obviously, for us is Viney. Wow, he's going to be wound up. You've got to assume that his numbers, his high performance numbers, are okay, and that they're confident that he can contribute to the level that you want players to be contributing to in a big game. I see him basically playing Salo's role, so going to the middle or taking around the ground stoppages potentially, but more being a power forward that rocks into that or slots into that forward 7, high half forward rotation, I should say, and gives the players like Sharp and Chin and that those players a chop out, and that he does some serious damage inside 50. I think I've talked about this a number of times. I think that's the role going forward for Jack. High pressure forward who smashes body. His kicking is actually pretty good at goal. He's an excellent kick. It's just that in field kicking, he doesn't get depth on it and helicopters it a bit. But around the goals, he's a good snap at goal, and he's a good set shot for goal. And I can imagine his KPI will be pressure and tackles inside 50. So, and the other thing is that he brings, he's a premiership player. So, this is a big final. They depend, like us, on some of their younger players. So we've got 8 players, I do believe, playing their first final in this game, including Fitzy, who must think, he must pinch himself. A few months ago, he was playing at Williamstown and dealing with the bitter cold coming off the Port Phillip Bay there, and now he's playing at the G in front of 90,000 people. So huge for him. 8 players, but they've got I don't know how many of their players haven't played finals. I'd be guessing quite a few, but certainly Jagger Smith and hasn't. So and I'm not sure if Dean. No, Dean hasn't either. So I don't think he has. I think his experience, Viney's experience is terrific. And ditto for Melksham. So, geez, I didn't think Melksham would be coming either. It's an interesting one for Melksham. So, yeah. Maybe he goes to Wiedering and plays a defensive forward role. That will be interesting. I think the sort of the acid test for Melk will be that he needs to kick some goals. So sure, he could play a defensive role in Wiedering and take that Wiedering's intercept marking out of the equation a little bit. But given that he's not got the run that Jeffo offers, his ability to get up and down the ground isn't quite the same. And he's certainly not got the acceleration and striding speed that Jefferson does. I think he's going to have to kick some goals. But look, he's got a record of big games. He's come in at least once this season unexpectedly, or at least for me, and performed at a high level. And so, it's absolutely not beyond Melk to come in and play a super damaging game as a medium marking option down forward. Also, perhaps with a role as a defensive forward, although he hates that idea against Wiedering. So, XL, I reckon, is amazing. XT, Xavier Taylor. He's a really fascinating one. I think that's sort of a bit of the psyche of King. He's given this young man an opportunity. He will have been busting down the door all season. He's been made to wait his turn. I think he's a really good replacement for Lever because they're not super tall down back. McKay's 200 centimetres, so he's obviously a big fella. But McGovern's only 190 centimetres, and Kemp, a player I really, really rate, is 192. So it's not like they're going to stretch us too big for height. And Xavier Taylor, he zones off well to intercept. That's his go. And hopefully he'll provide good run and attack from half-back flank. So, I think it's a really good like-for-like replacement for Lever, and he's going to have good run too. So, I think it's a good in, but he's been given this opportunity, and let's see how he goes. He strikes me as a young man who wants that opportunity. He likes to be involved in the big moments, I suspect. So, he's been given his opportunity. So let's see how he goes on in the big show. Just in terms of the height, in terms of their key position forwards not being super tall. By way of contrast, our forward line, Petty's 197. If T-Mac plays forward again, which I'm presuming he will, he's 195. Frid is 188 centimetres and Melksham is 186. So, excuse me. So, in terms of height, our forward line is almost as tall. Betting's interesting in this game. I said before last week, before the outs were confirmed that Jeffo and Lever were both out, I would have us as favourite. The market doesn't. But, I think this is important. If you listen to the media, or at least what I read on Demon Land, the media is saying, so it's sort of secondhand, I guess. If you listen to the media, you'd think that Carlton were $1.50 favourites to win this game. They're not. They're $1.73. We're $2.12. That's not a million miles off both teams' even money. And to be honest, it's not far off right. I reckon that's about right with our injuries, and I guess what I said before about, I guess, in terms of the injuries, but look, that's probably about right. But it's worth noting, too, as I said, that's pretty close to even money. And one of the things I like about, I like punting, obviously, but the market is a great, I think, the best sort of way of looking at what the probability of an outcome is. And so plenty of people would disagree with that. But it's a bit like the conversation around the prediction markets. It's all the rage at the moment. This idea of the wisdom of the crowds and is that there's a different, one of the discussion points in America at the moment is the accuracy of the prediction market, in particular how accurately it predicted the 2024 US election results compared to the polling. And I heard, I forget what was the CEO of one of the Kalsha maybe, or the other one, was talking about, the difference is between polling and prediction market is that if you're making a prediction, you're putting your money down. You're putting your money where your mouth is. Whereas if you're answering a poll question, there's no penalty at all for for saying whatever you want to say. And so it's exactly the same with punting. So people might have, you might ask 100 people who's going to win out of the Blues and the Ds, and 80 might say Carlton. Well, who cares what they say? The betting market, people putting their hard-earned money on it, including big professional punters. We're 24 hours out from the game, so the pool would be pretty big. We're talking for a final probably $2-3 million for a sports bet, for instance. They don't publish the pools. So there's a fair bit of money there. The wisdom of the crowd has this game not far off a toss-up. You wouldn't know that if you listen to the footy media, who is all aboard the Carlton bandwagon. So I'm really confident in this game. And so, I don't back Melbourne, bet on Melbourne, as I've said before. And this one's probably a good, week not to, because I think I'm being objective here, but, really I'm probably not being objective. As I'll unpack a bit later. That said, though, I think our game plan really matches up well against Carlton. And I think, to be honest, even with the injuries, we're a better team. And, our record at the MCG is formidable, and as is our experience. So I mentioned we've got 8 players playing their first final. I haven't counted it up, but a few weeks ago we had 11 players, premiership players in the team. So I could tot them up in my head, but we've got at least 10 players who played in a premiership. So Carlton have 0. As far as I can, maybe they've got someone who came from another club, but that's got to count for something. And that sort of experience that you cannot buy of Melksham and Viney offsets a bit of the experience we lose with Lever, I think so. But yeah, you cannot buy experience. So that 212 is about right, I reckon. The line is 4.5. If I was to have a bet, the total game points over and under is 175. If I was going to have a bet in this game, it would be Melbourne plus 40 at 750. So I actually think that there's every chance that we'll win pretty well in this game. It's a classic pattern that happens in elimination finals, is that once the game's dead, if one team, for instance, at the beginning of the third quarter, last quarter, gets out to 30-point lead and 40-point lead, and it doesn't look like that it's not possible for the other team to come back, almost always the team that's losing just puts their cue in the rack, because what's to play for from that point? They know that their season's done and dusted. And so blowouts in an elimination final, of which this is the equivalent of elimination final, obviously, both, the losers out, is, the same deal. If it looks like that, we're going to win the game 10 minutes into the last quarter, the most likely scenario is we go on to win by a margin. So, yeah, I reckon the 750 for 40 points plus is a good value bet. All right, so that's the overarching stuff. Betting, the weather. So the weather looks perfect. So some sun then turning cloudy is the forecast for the tomorrow. But in the evening is cloudy, low of 8, and not much wind, 7 kilometres. So really light winds, which is great because it gets swirly there. A cloud covered 91%, so hopefully it won't get too dewy. So just perfect conditions for footy, which is awesome. Probably suits them a little bit because of their high possession style, probably comes undone a little bit in sort of wet or slippery conditions, but it certainly doesn't hurt us either because, we've got to chain up those handballs when we're playing well. So, yeah, perfect night for the footy, terrific conditions for our home game at our mighty fortress. So, looking at the sort of a brief overview of the stats comparisons, some of the sort of high-level stats, the team stats. So time in forward half, 51.8% of the time for us, 50.2% for them. So as I've talked about all season, we're a get it forward territory team, long kicking, get it in our forward half, trap it in and put the opposition under pressure. Time in possession, this really reflects the two different styles of the side. So time in possession, negative 1.9 for us, plus 4.6 for them. They love to control the footy. Contested possession differential, there's a lot been made about the changes Fraser's made to the way they play their game, the high possession style, but, it's still one wood for them, or fundamental, and really it is for all teams who are contenders, is contested possessions. They're averaging 6.7 more contested possessions than their opponents this season. We're averaging 5.2 more. So, they win their hard ball. That's an important number. It's going to be a big factor on Saturday night. Clearances just about level. So, it really is two different styles here, attack versus defense. It's another one of those games. It's one reason why I'm confident, is because I think our style will unpick their style. We're averaging 100 points bang on, which is remarkable. So 100 points after 24 rounds of footy per game. They're averaging 87.3 points per game. That's a big difference. 13 just, reflects our scoring power. Scoring will be, putting scoreboard pressure on is going to be critical. Points from turnover, this is a massive one. 56 we're averaging on turnover a game, and they're only averaging 43.3, which is really interesting because, as I'm unpacking a bit there through the keys to winning, they move the ball really well. Actually, it's one of the things from the back half, much better under Fraser than Voss. That's been spoken about a bit, but they don't really put that on the scoreboard. They move it, but that doesn't turn into a score. And part of the puzzle there is the points from turnover. So 43.3 points from turnover. I think that's a big worry. As I said, we're averaging 56. That's all about our, swarm style. When we're up and about, smash teams, force them to cough it up, put them under pressure, and then hurt them on turnover. 43.3 ain't going to get it done, I don't think. So points from stoppages, we're slightly better, 40 to 39 points per game. Chains to score percentage, and this is the point I was making before, 23.1% of our chains result in our disposal chains result in a score, 21.7 to them. Doesn't sound much, but, everyone's pumping up how much better their ball movement is. Well, it ain't as good as ours. D50 to forward 50%. This is an interesting one. 25.4% of the time they go from their D50 to forward 50%. We're 24.1. So they actually move it slightly better, like at a slightly higher rate than we do from the back half, but they don't put that score on the scoreboard. Inside 50, 57.3 to 52, reflecting what I said before, being a territory side. Look for us if we're up and about to win that count on Saturday night. We have two more shots. We have two more shots than them at goal, and scores for inside 50 are almost bang on, 46 for us and 46.8 for them. Defensively, they've got us for all of the sort of things that sort of the overarching key ones. We beat them in some things when you drill down, but total points, they're only giving up 86 this season. We're giving up 91. That's come down from 100, as I've spoke, 101, I think, at round 10. So, which is coincidentally when Fraser took over, actually. Since round 10, defensively, we've been much, much better. Points from turnover, they only concede 48.7. It's been a worry for us. We concede 52.7, including, I think it was 63 last week against the Dogs. That was a huge factor in the Dogs winning. Points from stoppages, their opponents only score 32.3. Our opponents score 35.9. And the others are fairly similar. So chain to score percentage, D50 to forward 50, inside 50s, opposition shots and scores for inside 50, all relatively similar, though the Blues have us for all of them just. In terms of their top 5 rated players, really interesting, or I'll go through a few of them. So this is really curious, actually. So their highest rated player is this season Patrick Cripps, 13.2. Their second highest rated, none of these will be surprised, I guess, Sam Walsh, 12.8. Mark Pitternet, their third highest rated player, 12.3. George Hewitt, fourth highest rated player, 12.3. Zach Williams is 11.6. Oliver Florent is 11.6. So Jagger Smith is way down. Well, not way down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11th. Jagger Smith is his play ratings 11, though you'd think he was the best player in the league, the way that people bang on about him. What's interesting, I thought, was, they're pretty low, those top-end players. They're pretty low ratings. When you compare them to our ratings this season, Cozzy, who's dropped off, it must be said, his high was 17. He's dropped down to 15.3. He's 17.8 at one stage. So he has dropped off quite a bit in the last few weeks. So that's going to be key that Cozzy gets back to his damaging best. But Maxi Gawn, his player rating is 18. What a star, I tell you. So I'll talk to him in a second. I don't want to put the moz on him. So just to start, 18 rating, almost 5 player rating points higher than their highest. Our second is Cozzy, 15.3. So our third is Tom Sparrow, 13.4. So Tom Sparrow is rated higher than his season. His rating this season, 13.4, is rated higher than any Carlton player. So he's 13.4, and the Blues' highest rated player this season is 13.2. Again, you wouldn't think that if you listen to the media. Next for us is Bowie, who's 13. His player rating season is our fourth, and Kade Chandler is our fifth highest rated, 13. Jack Steele was actually dropped as well. He was, I think, our third or fourth for a big chunk of the season. He's down 6th rated player for the season, 12.5 player rating points. A player who has really improved in the last handful of games is Bailey Fritsch. He's at number 7. He's kicked 35 goals for the season, and his player rating this season is a very handy 10.9 for a medium forward. I think that's interesting in terms of the top end players, and a lot this game. A lot of it will come down to, I think, Max Gawn and Cozzy Pickett, that top end compared to their top end, Walsh and Cripps, and I'll talk about the key players in a sec. So obviously a lot's been made about Fraser taking over from Voss. He did so in round 10. So just sort of talking quickly about the changes that Fraser's introduced. They've definitely, or not definitely, 100% noticeably changed their game style since Fraser took over from Voss ahead of round 10. They've shifted to a high mark, high possession style of play. For reflecting that since round 9, since round 10, they've gone from 13th in the AFL to 1st in the AFL for short, number 1 in the AFL for short kicks. They've gone from 15th to 15th to number 1 in the AFL for effective kicks. They've gone from 14th to number 1 in the AFL for uncontested possessions. They've gone from 13th to number 1 for uncontested marks, and from 6th to 18th for long kicks, which is really, really, really key, I think. Definitely a big change in style. Conversely, we're 15th for short kicks. We're 15th for uncontested marks in the AFL, and critically, we're number 3 in the AFL for long kicking. So 2 really, really different styles in terms of ball movement. For me personally, I think that our style holds up better under the crucible of a final. Speaking of the crucible of the final, whilst the contest remains important to the Blues, they have shifted away a little bit from that combative game plan that Voss loved so much. And that we do, it has to be said, towards a more free-flowing style. So that change in style, we've seen Carlton become number 2 in the AFL for transitioning the ball from the defensive 50 to the forward 50 in the 15 rounds since Fraser has taken over. So since Fraser's taken over, they're number 2 in the AFL for moving the ball from the defensive 50 to forward 50. Though it's worth noting that improved ball movement from the back half, as I sort of flagged before, hasn't really translated into scoring, being a super high scoring side from the back half, sort of evidencing that they're number 14 in the AFL for average scores from the defensive half. Above only Port Adelaide, Essendon, West Coast and the Tigers. They only averaged 30.3 points from their defensive half. That's, I know that sort of part of that, 9 of those games were with Voss and they weren't moving a ball from the back half, but nonetheless, that's pretty average scores from the back half, which says that, to me, that whilst sure they might be moving the ball well from the back half, they're not turning them into scores. So, I think, and we do, we're averaging, I think I have to look, but we're 50, I think we're 38 from the back half. I've got that in a sec. So we move the ball, well from the back half, perhaps not quite as well, but we score more when we do with our method. I thought these comments were really interesting. Voss was on AFL.com's finals film room. So I just grabbed this from AFL.com. I didn't actually watch it, but I did read this in preparing for today's show, and I thought these comments were really interesting. So on that show, Voss said that whilst adjustments have been, whilst the adjustments that Fraser have made, the ones I highlighted, have been obviously spectacularly successful, they could be tested again when the Blues take on the Demons in the Wildcard Final at the MCG on Saturday night. And this is the quote that I thought was interesting. "You'll notice across the game style there are some subtle changes," Voss said, speaking alongside Essendon champion Matthew Lloyd. "There are absolutely some subtle changes, and the short kicks everyone has spoken about, they value possession even more so. Once upon a time," so by that I guess he means that they value keeping possession even more so. "Once upon a time where they'd take territory, they're now trying to find a mark. So not long kicking, doing everything they can to avoid long kicks. If you match that up against Melbourne, though, the Demons want to kick the ball long. They're happy to take it to a contest really quickly, get you on one-on-ones, get territory on the field, and they're very low on short kicks." Look, the changes have certainly been successful since Fraser. I agree with those comments. So, that's a different, the different style, and I think our method will stack up better in this game and in finals. So, the changes have certainly been successful since Fraser took over. The scoreboard shows that, the win-loss. They've won, since he took over, they've won 11, and they've won 11 and a draw in their past 14 matches, the best record of any team in that period. So, nonetheless, I think they've been overrated and are overrated. Doug Reamer asked a question on Demonland about how we're going with Roo. Doug, I didn't have the opportunity to drill down in when we play without Roo. Suffice to say, it's a massive loss. As George said on the podcast on Demonland, I think a really key part of the loss was that meant that T-Mac had to go forward, which I think rattled our defensive unit. It wasn't helped by the fact that I think it wasn't long after halftime that Lever broke his toe or did whatever damage he did that's seen him not playing this week. So, we had to put Turner down forward, up forward and move that around. So, I think that T-Mac having to go forward is a big sort of negative. Although he was fine up forward, and a big negative with Roo going out. But there's no other way to cut it other than it's a huge loss, Roo not being in this side. Okay, so key opposition players, interesting one. So I mentioned the top 5 already in terms of player ratings. I think the key opposition players, I think just about the most important player for them is Pitnet. I say that he's obviously he's number 1 for the Blues for hit-outs, obviously. He's also, as I mentioned before, the 3rd highest rated player this season for them. Why I think he's the most critical player for them is that Max is going to be the defining player in this game, I feel, and that Pitnet's got a huge job on him. I've heard that he loves that challenge previously. He's a good player, Pitnet, as his rating indicates. It's a solid season of footy he's putting together. He is the sort of player that does well against Max. He's physical. He's very physical. He'll look to be physical against Gawn, and I think that the Blues will be as well. They'll look to hit him and take him out of the contest. The thing about Pitnet, though, is he's a ruckman, and they still, their clearance and stoppage work is fundamental to their game as well. So, it's not like he's going to be able to do something like Lobb did last week and really just just look to negate Maxi and do nothing else. I don't think that works for their system. So whilst he's going to look to negate Maxi to an extent, he's still got to play his game because they've got to score from stoppages to beat us. They've got to mitigate us winning too many stoppages because territory is so important to us. So I think he is a massively important player in this game. I think that battle will go a long way to deciding this match. Cripps, it's funny. Blues fans wanted him gone early in the season, and now he's up and about. So he's a huge player for them. Obviously, he's number one for the Blues for contested possessions per game, centre clearances per game, stoppage clearances per game. This one was a good one. I know he's under pressure when he's kicking, but he's also number one for the Blues for clangers per game. So look for the D's to be putting him under massive pressure. It's going to be key to this game, our pressure. If we can get that pressure right, let's force him to cough the ball up. I think Walsh is super important. I was actually pretty surprised. He is number one for the Blues for average effective disposals per game. I've always thought he coughs the ball up a fair bit, but his disposals have been really good this game. Potentially padded a little bit, must be said, by that chip mark style that they do. But nonetheless, he's number one for effective disposals at the Blues. He's also, this is critical, he's number one for the Blues for average score involvements per game. And he's also number one for the Blues for average disposals per game. Ideally, we really keep the ball out of his hands, and maybe it's a job for Steele to mitigate or to negate Walsh's influence. Jagger Smith, anyone would think he's their highest rated player. He's not. He's down. I think I said, what is he? What is that? So he is their 7th or 8th. So his season rating is 11. By way of contrast, Bailey Fritch's is 10.9, almost exactly the same. So Jack Steele's 12.5. So that's good context, I think. But nonetheless, total gun, a really smooth mover. Obviously, he was a runaway rising star and backable favourite coming into it and won the rising star. Second, I think, was bloody Harry Dean, so it's pretty good for the Blues having 1 and 2. He's equal number 2 at the Blues with Cripps for inside 50s, and he's involved in 26.5% of all Blues scores. He's a key part of their midfield. I don't think we'll be tagging him, but it'll be interesting to see, how he goes in his first final, and an important player for them, and obviously a key part of their midfield. A player that I've got a lot of time for, as I mentioned before, and I think is important, a medium side forward, is Kemp. He's number one for the Blues for average marks inside 50 per game. He's number one for Blues for average tackles inside 50 per game. And he's number one for the Blues for average goals per game, which surprised me. He's averaging 1.57 goals per game. So I think he's going to be key. Some others, other key players, Oliver Florin is number one for the Blues for metres gained per game and rebound 50s per game. So he's a really important part of their transition game and their ball movement. Similarly, Harry Dean is as well. He's a terrific young defender. He's already a talisman for them. The Blues fans love him, but he's not, again, I think there's a tendency for everything to do with the Blues to be overrated, to be perfectly honest. And I'm just trying to find what his player rating is here. Let's have a look. Where is he on this list? Harry Dean. So his player rating this season, speaking to overrated, tending to overrate players. Now, I agree that there's an extent to which some of these players are the defenders are disadvantaged by the player rating system. So be that as may, his player rating this season is 6.8. So that ain't so flash, really. That's let's have a look at a couple of outer defenders. All right, Colt playing a very similar role to a degree, or maybe not. He's not a key defender. So, but nonetheless, Colt is averaging 8.5. His player rating this season is 8.5. So 6.8. Isn't. You'd think that with all of the hullabaloo around Harry Dean, that he would be, that he'd be considered, he'd be up around 15 or something player rating points. So 6.8. CJ, who gets criticised by Demons fan left, right, and centre, well, he's 6.9, and Tommy McDonald, who's played back for big chunks, he's 7.2. So, yeah, I'm not disputing he's a good player, but I think he's a little bit overrated, to be perfectly honest. And I think the other key players are their 3 small forwards, Burns, Frankie Evans and Ainsworth. The ground ball will be massive in this game. In all finals, it's massive, but particularly the way we play footy. They like to be surgical going inside 50. They are patient and they like to hit up their forwards, obviously, but nonetheless, ground ball gets will be important in this game. So I just wanted to really comment about these players. I think, it's going to be critical that Maxi has a big game, and it is going to be critical that Cozzy does. Now, Cozzy is a big game player. So, I think that he's due a big game, and I can expect that, we can expect to see him go bananas. But just a shout out to Max Gawn, All-Australian captain, 9th All-Australian selection. I've run out of superlatives for the bloke. He will pick this team up and put it on his back, and we will win this game on his back. He's just, as I said, I'm not normally lost for words, but I certainly am when it comes to superlatives. So Maxi Gawn, what a season. I've run through these numbers before, but, it's worth doing again. His highest career is 34, and his highest rated game for his career. He's played, He's played 200 and, let's have a look. He's played 270 games, and this is his highest rated career of his of a stellar career. It's amazing. So time on ground, he's 83.3% of the time. He's averaging 21.7 disposals, inside 53.7 a match, rebound 50s 1.7 a match. That's right up there. Meters gained 273.6. He's averaging 13.3 contested possessions per game. He's averaging 6.6 clearances per game. That's number one. In the next clearances per game is Tommy Sparrow at 5.5. He's averaging 4.5 marks a game. He's averaging 1.5 contested marks per game. And by the way, Pets is averaging 1.5 contested marks a game now as well. What a performance that was from a marking perspective last week. He's averaging 33 hitouts per game. He is just an all-time great AFL football, and obviously an all-time great of the Melbourne Footy Club. And I don't think it can be underestimated how important he is for this match, which is a big reason why I've highlighted the importance of Pitnet to this game. All right, so keys to winning. Last week I said that winning the contest and pressure battle is a given against the Dogs. Pressure and contest remain undefeated. Everything else flows from there. Our ability to intercept, win the ball back off the opposition, create turnovers, have an opportunity to score from turnovers, etc., etc. That proved to be the case last week, that was important. Our pressure was okay. Under Voss, the pressure and contest at the Blues were fundamental to their game plan. Despite the changes, though, and that sort of, more attractive ball movement style that Fraser's introduced, it still remains important for the Blues, as I've talked about. It is for all of the contenders. So they're number 2 for contested possession differential in the AFL. We're number 3, and looking at us in terms of our contest in the show that I referenced earlier, Voss said that while the D's have kicked 100 or more points 12 times this season, Melbourne's toughness has been underestimated. And he said, "I just think their original fundamentals are about playing tough. We get mesmerised by the ball movement, but they're a tough group," Voss said. And Carlton, they can do contest blindfolded. So this is where Melbourne needs to aim up. They did a couple of weeks ago against Fremantle, against a really strong contested team. So, yeah, they are a contested team. We're a contested team. Freo are as well. It's going to be critical for this match, but it is every week, so it's a given, I think. The other given, I think, is scoreboard pressure, in particular early scoreboard pressure. I said this about last week, and it proved to be the opposite. We couldn't put them under scoreboard pressure. In fact, they put us under scoreboard pressure early on, and we were playing catch-up for the rest of the game and never could quite catch up. Our pressure in that first quarter was woeful, 150. It was okay from after that, but so was our contest. But really, we lost that game in that first quarter, and we lost that game because our pressure and contest wasn't up to the mark. But I think that scoreboard pressure is going to be important for a number of reasons. Obviously, puts them under pressure, but we want to make this a high-scoring game if we can. We want to make it a shootout, put pressure on the Blues to have to score. Now, I said that the Dogs struggled to do so struggled to score high in the preview last week, and they did score high. That was a key to winning, just not how winning. So I think, though, if we can make this a high-scoring game, then it'll suit us. It'll put the pressure on the Blues. And the way to do that is to get the scoreboard ticking early. And, obviously the other key to that is if you can score early, if we can get scores on the board early, even if it's level at half, quarter time, for instance, you take the crowd out of the equation. If we can get 2-3 goals up at quarter time, we'll go on to win this game. I'm super positive of that. So that first quarter is going to be critical. Another given, I've talked about this last week as well, so is winning scores from stoppages, the centre square clearances and around the ground stoppages. I think that is going to be really important. Where in terms of how that looks between the two teams, we're number 1 for centre clearances differential in the AFL. They're number 10. The Blues, though, are number 7 for stoppage clearance differential, and we're 15. And I talked about that last week, which is a bit of a curiosity, is that, we're so low on winning stoppages, around the ground stoppages. So, as I said last week, that's got to be a tactical thing. Ironically, we won centre clearance scores stoppage total scores for, and the actual raw number of stoppages last week, and still lost that game. The Blues are number 4 for scores from all stoppages differential, and we're number 7. Super important. This is a really important battle because the Blues generate a lot of their scoring from stoppages, which is sort of the antithesis to a degree to the way footy's being played. It's worth noting they average 6.8 more points from stoppages than their opponents this season. We average 4.2 more points from stoppages than our opponents. That's quite a big gap. So, that explains therefore from scores from all stoppages differential, we're number 7. Really, really demonstrates how important winning the stoppage scoring battle is to their game. We're much more about turnover. We're number 8 for scores from turnover differential this season. They're number 13 for scores from turnover differential. And average scores from turnover are even more revealing. We're number 5 for average scores from turnover, behind the Swans, Cats, Lions and Hawks, and just above Freo. So the best teams in the AFL, they score high on average scores from turnover. They score heavily on turnover. We're averaging 56 points per game on turnover. The Blues, on the other hand, they're only they're number 15 for this. So they're only averaging 43.3 points from turnover. That's nearly 13 points difference. That's massive. That is really massive. Further emphasising the difference in style and score sources, we're number 4 for average scores from our defensive half, behind the Swans, Freo and the Lions. So again, the contenders, the best teams, score heavily from the back half. We're number 4 in the AFL for doing so. We average 38.5 points from our defensive half. They're number 14 for scores from their defensive half. As I mentioned previously, only above Port, Essendon, West Coast and Tigers. They only average 30.3 points from the defensive half. That's a lot. That's 8.2 less than us per game. And so for all the talk about their improved ball movement from the back half, it's not translating into score. So as I mentioned before, they do move the ball slightly better than us from their defensive half, but they're not. That doesn't translate to scores. So I think this is a major advantage for us. And by the by, on that point, I've been amazed that aspect, that the Blues' inability to score from their back half and on turnover has not been scrutinised more, in particular in the last few weeks, given how many pundits at the moment are banging on about the importance, how critical ball movement and transition is, how key it is to being a contender in footy the way it's being played at the moment. That opinion, which I agree with, is supported by the fact that the ladder mirrors those numbers, and has done. The last 4 flag winners have been teams that have had elite ball movement and been able to score, not just move the ball well like the Carlton are at the moment, been able to score from the back half and from the half-back flank. And so, as I said, the ladder mirrors I mentioned before, what was it? So the average scores from defensive half is Swans, Freo, Lions and us. So the best teams score from the back half, and they're down at 14. So, I find it curious that they haven't been scrutinised more for for that, because it's a sort of antithesis, the way they like to play. They rely so heavily on their scoring from stoppages. That's going to be a key battle, I think. Finally, on the stoppage battle, it's important, particularly the centre bounce battle, I think, in terms of the territory that you win or we can win from that. Playing the game in our forward half is absolutely fundamental to the way we play footy and our method. Reflecting that, we're number 4 in the AFL for inside 50s. We're number 5 in the AFL for inside 50 differentials. And we want the game played in our forward half. So I think they're all given. So they're all keys to winning, but they're sort of givens. The other one, the most important one of they're buried in that is in the contest is pressure rating. So, I mentioned last week, top 6 sides versus when they play other sides win 93% of the games this season when they have the higher pressure rating. And across the AFL, the team with a higher pressure rating, I think I'm right in saying it was 75%. We've just got to win the pressure rating battle, and we have to win it from the get-go. We did in the last 3 quarters against the Dogs, but the damage was done with our low pressure in 150 in that first quarter. We lost the game in that first quarter because our pressure wasn't where it needed to be. 100% needs to be there right from the get-go in this game. So outside those fundamental factors, I think there are 3 keys to winning. And these 3 keys to winning really are all interrelated. In many ways, the most significant one for me is our running power and running game needs to be in optimal shape. So for me, that's the key to us winning this game. If it is, I think we win this game. Related to that is winning the scores from turnover battle. And finally, critically, we need to take away their uncontested marks, uncontested possessions, including taking away the corridor kick that they love to do. They're really patient. They wait until that opens up and they take that kick on. We've got to take that away from them. And we've also got to take that inside 50 kick that they love to do on the 45, sort of an angled kick to a leading forward, sometimes often Kemp, and those small forwards that I mentioned before, and obviously Harry Mackay. But yeah, we've got to take them away, take them off the game. Like against Hawthorn, for instance, we've got to swarm them. So I'll unpack that in a sec. But running power, I've talked about this all season. I talked about it last week. It's central to how we play. In the preview last week about the Dogs game, I said that how critical it was going to be, and well, it proved to be critical. It proved to be the key to winning. Unfortunately, it was the key to the Dogs winning because our running power was nowhere near its best. Now, I spoke to these numbers on the Demon Land podcast with George on Monday, so forgive me if you've heard them before, but just to demonstrate how important our running power is to the way we play and our chances of winning in particular games. It was poor against the Dogs. Against the Dogs was only the 5th time this year we've covered less high-speed kilometres than our opponents. Every time in all 5 examples we lost those games. I talked about how critical it was the previous weeks against Port and against Freo. So, when we get that up and about, we're swarming, we get multiple players to the contest, that is shown up in the numbers when we outnumber them and we're running, the whole team is running on top of the ground and we're getting numbers everywhere. We're getting that swarm going. Is that, we smashed Port, we smashed Freo for post-clearance contested possession. I think it was 30 plus 34 against Freo, plus 38 against Port. We smashed them for post-clearance ground ball gets, both teams, and we smashed them for ground ball gets. And we also smashed them for post-clearance equity points. Last week against the Dogs, they smashed us. They were plus 26 for ground ball gets. They were plus 10 for post-clearance contested possessions, and they were plus 11 for post-clearance ground ball gets. And this is, for me, was a big one. Post-clearance equity points, which measures the impact, the aggregated up impact for each player post-clearance in terms of scoreboard impact. They smashed us 113 equity points we scored. They scored 151.8, so negative. They were plus 37.8. 37.9 post-clearance equity points. For context, our season average is 124. So, well down on our season average. And I also spoke about this last week in all but one of our wins, the Lions game, we've had the majority of top 5 players for average speed and defence, almost always the number one, and more often not all 5 players. Well, the Dogs had 3 of the top 5 players for average speed and defence. So, look, it just that's all really to make my point of how critical it is in this match. Interestingly, a poster on Demonland yesterday posted called Maximum posted the following. That they were, quote, shocked to hear that the reason we may have seemed sluggish against the Dogs last week was because we had a heavier training load during the week. Yeah, it's interesting. I asked Maximum where he'd heard that, and I didn't get a reply. So, but it wouldn't shock me if that was the case. That as I just highlighted, the data is clear. The Telstra tracker numbers, the GPS numbers, the post clearance numbers, transition numbers, etc. It was clear that we were miles off in terms of our optimal running power compared to when we were really running on top of the ground, running in waves and swarming our opponent. And, if you're one to think stats are overrated, for me, the eye test told exactly the same story. And if you read Demonland, but, there are a bunch of people who don't put much stock in stats. They were all saying the same thing post-games. We were constantly second to the ball and we were outnumbered at the contest all day. Sure, Bevo and the Dogs deserve credit for some of that, but the data and the eye test suggest to me that the most likely contributing factor was fatigue. Perhaps choosing to do a heavy training load that week was the key factor in that fatigue. And just on that, that's a risk reward. It's a really good and sort of microcosm of the whole season's high performance program. I've talked about this all season. You have target games and it's a calculated gamble. If they did do a heavy block of training, the calculated gamble was that we'd get through last week's game, we'd win that game, we'd have a week off, and that we'd get the benefit of that heavy block of training in the elimination final and in the next games. They're in it to win the flag. And so you plan your high performance program not to win, to win the flag, to give you best chance of winning the flag. Now, we lost last week. So if that was the case, it's a reasonable criticism to say, well, what was that about? Because of the risk reward. Well, we took all of the risk and got none of the reward. So, but look, perhaps it wasn't. We didn't do a heavy trading load. So perhaps our fatigue, wasn't related to doing a heavy training load ahead of the Dogs game. But if it wasn't, as I talked about on the Demonland podcast on Monday, Selwyn and the high performance team erred in terms of fatigue management, because whatever the case was, you can't tell me that we weren't fatigued last week, as the eye test and the data both tell the same story. In either scenario, though, assuming it's correct, we had a light week on the track, which a number of track watchers on Demonland have suggested that's the case. Then logic suggests that if we're not cooked, and it has to be said that that's a potential. Maybe we've just run out of gas, full stop. Logic suggests then, like our Freo game, will come into where it's important to remember against the Freo game came after the 6-day break from the Suns game. They didn't do any training at all. They let the players stay up on the Gold Coast for a couple of days, and they would have done no more than a flush run probably in the lead up to the Freo game. And remember, just go back and watch the first 10 minutes of that game and then watch the first 10 minutes of the Dogs game. 2 different times. 2 different teams. We're so energized. We're so up and about. We were running in waves in that Freo game. I'm hoping that, the same will happen this week. We had a light week on the track. And then so, if we're not cooked, I expect the same thing will happen for us, and that our running power will be back to its awesome, formidable best. If it is back to its best, I think we'll smash the Blues in scores from turnover, scores from defensive half, all the other key transition and ball movement numbers, handball meters gained, marks inside 50, because marks inside 50s correlate to fast ball movement. You get behind don't allow the defence to set up. I think forward half pressure will be super important in this game, but sort of winning the ball back in the midfield and bouncing it straight back in quickly. But getting multiple players to the contest, that long kicking is all about kicking to a contest. Is if our uncontested marking, I think we're number 2 in the AFL this season, has been awesome. But really, it's about when the ball hits the deck and multiple numbers swarming. That's where you get the post-clearance win. That's where you get your ground ball gets wins. If we can get multiple numbers with our swarm, that's why I say these are all interconnected. With the multiple players, outnumber them at the contest, we'll win those ground ball gets, we'll win this game. This is where that interconnectedness is the sort of next key to winning, was winning the scores from turnover battle. In some ways, it's more a key performance indicator as opposed to sort of, I guess, a strategy or a method. It's an outcome measure, really. It's an outcome measure of our ball movement working, our ball movement game working, our transition game working more than a strategy. So arguably, it's not so much a key to winning as such. It's an indicator that we are winning if we're winning the turnover battle. Nonetheless, it points to the importance of not giving the ball back to the Blues, hitting our targets by hand and foot on transition, and importantly and above all, taking our scoring chances, all of them, but on turnover. On that last point, if our ball movement game is in good shape, our forward line will be open. There'll be more spaces for our forwards to lead into. And so it's really critical that when we have those opportunities, when our Melksham and our forwards are leading into space, Fritter and others, that we hit those leads, and that when we do hit those leads, that the forward goes back and slots them. So, that's where you get your high marks inside 50 when the ball's bouncing. So winning the scores from turnover battle will be important. Now, I talked about that being a KPI rather than a strategy. Well, a strategy that's going to be fundamental is we just simply have to take away their uncontested marks and uncontested possessions to win this game. We need to force them to kick long down the line as much as possible. We need to take away the corridor kick, as I mentioned before, and we've got to take away that inside 50 kick into the 45. Look for us to be clogging up the corridor, just highlighting how important to them their uncontested marks and the high possession game is to the way they play footy. Their method at the moment under Fraser is they're second in the AFL, number 2 in the AFL for kicks per game. They're number 5 in the AFL for handball per game. They're number 2 in the AFL for disposals, for total disposals per game. They're number 2 in the AFL for marks per game. They're number 2 in the AFL for uncontested possessions per game. And they're number 2 in the AFL for effective disposals per game. That number's completely padded out by all that chip marking. Under Fraser, maintaining possession is really critical. They do that with short kicking, often on the angle. So it's obviously a fundamental part of his philosophy. I do wonder whether it's in part to do with their athletic profile. I just don't think they're as much as everyone's jumping up and down about how much better their ball movement is. I actually don't think their athletic profile was that great. And I do wonder whether this method is to do with that, is to mitigate the fact that they're coming up against teams like us with much better athletic profiles. So you don't want to get into a back and forward tic-tac, like a up the ground, down the ground game. So they don't want to. They do not want to get this into a high-octane game that bounces back and forth. They want to control it. They are absolutely the opposite to us, as they do their best to avoid long down the line kicks. We kick, if there's not a short option, we go down the line all the time. So in the wins under Fraser, actually I'm not sure if this is under Fraser or just all up, the Blues in their wins, when they win, they average 113 marks. In their losses, that number drops to 89 marks per game. When we win, our opponents average 93 marks. When we lose, our opponents average 110 marks. And I think that really, really demonstrates the significance, the importance of us taking away those uncontested marks and those easy chip kicks. And they like to switch, move it across until they can move it. So how do you do that? talked about this through the season against different teams, like, for instance, Brisbane Lions. I also said it about the Dogs last week, but they did play a transition game, beat us at our own game last week, I have to say. A much more impressive performance than many on Demon Land, I think, give the Dogs credit for. But the go for, it's simple, isn't it? It's pressure, swarming, getting players right up in their grill, smash the bonnet, as I've talked about, frontal pressure, really disrupting that, not giving them those easy switch kicks. If they do, making sure that you man the mark and they can't immediately do another short kick, really pressing up on them, getting multiple players. It will come down to our ability to, that's why these are interrelated. We can only do that if our running power is close to our optimal best. Otherwise, they'll be spreading us apart and pulling us apart all game, and they'll win the game. So, that's why I think it's so fundamental, so critical that, where our running game's at. If it is, we won't give them space. We'll press up on them. And I think their method, I think it's got a big chink in the armour in terms of it standing up under finals pressure. So prediction. Summing all of that up, there was a terrific post from Colm on Demon Lane yesterday, part of which read, if we had loaded and can run out the game, well, I think we'll win. The two concerns that I have is Melky in for Jeffo will reduce our running power, and secondly, and more importantly, what if last week was just down to a long season and taxing game style that has taken its toll on the players, especially the younger ones? I thought that was a great post, to which I responded. I responded to that post. Part of that response was, I have exactly the same concerns. I'd add Viney's lack of speed also worries me, though he's quicker off the mark than Salo. The other issue is kicking goals. Given Melt probably won't get up the ground like Jeffo, in addition to providing pressure inside 50 and perhaps negating Wiedering, as I mentioned earlier, we will need him to kick goals. We could just well be buggered, particularly the young players who, with the exception of Colt, were all poor last week. If you look at the player ratings, the bottom half are all our younger players. Hopefully I went on to say, hopefully the lacklustre display by young players was down to struggling to cope with the work load of a heavier week, or just the workload generally, and with a freshen up that they've had this week, they'll all be good to go. Ditto for Sharp and Langdon, who were both flat as tacks last week. That was really big factor in our inability to defend turnover last week. And as I said, we gave up 63 points on turnover against the Dogs, against a team that don't actually have really don't do great for scores from turnover. And XT adds run, Xavier Taylor adds run, and I expect Xavier Lindsay will get much more time on ground. And I'm backing him in to have a big game along with Langford and Windsor, who are also both well down last week. We have two All-Australian players in our midfield, a better athletic profile, and if we have run in the legs, we'll swarm them, take away their uncontested marks, and bounce from the back half. This is all from my post. Injury and suspension has hit at a bad time, but as the latter suggests, we are the better team and we are playing at our fortress, which cannot be underestimated. I'm going to say we'll win. What is it? Our record there is, 10-2 or something? I only lost twice there this season. I think it's a huge factor. Again, I don't see anyone really highlighting it. Not that I've been reading the media, I have to say. I think despite their terrific record under Fraser, the Blues are ridiculously overrated. The Lions like a high disposal, lots of uncontested mark, control the ball style, very similar to the way Fraser has got them playing at the moment. So really similar to the method Fraser's using. But the Lions hold up under pressure because they have an incredible number of players with elite kicking skills. It's bananas. That's, as I said on the podcast on Monday, that's why they win the flag, I reckon. The Blues just don't. They don't have that number of players with elite kicking skills. So the pressure is going to be critical. As I've said, I think that method struggles to hold up under finals pressure. It doesn't so much for the Lions because just of how brilliant they are, how many good kicks they are. But I think the key game is the Dogs Blues game. Low scoring, 80-odd points each in that draw. That game was all about the Dogs' pressure. They just completely squeezed up on the Blues, took away that easy kick, and they made errors all game in that game. That was a really low standard game of footy, made more exciting by the draw, made more exciting by the fact that it meant that Blues were locked in for the wildcard round, but they were poor. Under pressure, they were poor. And I think that really points to how we'll win this game is basically not only pressure the receiver, so not to have good defensive spread to cover off that swip shot option, but to put mega pressure on the player kicking the ball on, so that those, that we increase the number of clangers, that we increase the number of times that they give the ball back to us. The referred pressure is such that even when they don't have immediate pressure on them, they cough the ball up because they think they're about to be hammered. Hammer them, swarm them, smash them. I really think that method they're using isn't built for finals. I really believe that. I think our method is 100% built for finals. It's what, the best teams are playing the way we're playing, with the exception of Brisbane. But even with Brisbane, their pressure is amazing when they're on. And as I've noted, I really think our style matches up super well against theirs. It's really chaos and swarm, our chaos and swarm versus their control. And in the heat of finals, chaos and swarm beats control. It just does. As I've discussed already, we just have to cut off the Blues' uncontested marks and those little chip passes that have become such a key element of the Blues' method under Fraser and their game plan. And we can only do so if our all-defensive run and spread is in optimal shape, as I've noted a few times. But if it is, if our running is in optimal shape, we'll swarm them. Our pressure will be enormous. We'll outnumber them at every contest. We'll win those contests. Our post-clearance numbers will be off the charts. We'll win the scores from turnover battle. We'll win the pressure battle. If we can match them in scores from stoppages, they will struggle to put a decent score on the board. We're a better team. I expect we'll win. I think we'll win by 42 points after it blowing out late in the last quarter. I cannot wait for tomorrow night. I'm obviously nervous about it, but I have faith in the team. It's really important to remember we've only lost 2 in a row once all season, and for me, the second one of them was the loss to the Giants at Traeger Park. That was all about preparing for the next game, which is the Big Freeze game. We were so focused on winning that game, and we did win that game. So, history says, the record says, is that we don't. Once we've lost 2 games in a row all season, and that game, that Alice, the game at the Alice was not a target game. So I expect this is a target game. I think we'll be way too good. I think we'll run over the top of them. As I say, D's by 42. Go D's. Go Red Leggers!
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's an emblem for me and for you. It's the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we sing a song for you. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. Well, the team played fine in the year 39. We're the team that no one can lick, and you'll find us there after the final bell with the spirit of 1926. Well, every heart beats true for the red and the blue as we finish sing this song to you. Should